I've been with Streamline for about 8 years now, and I've been on the sales side for the majority of that time. So we're talking to folks all day, every day across the United States about potentially switching software, what their pain points are. But mostly when you do switch, we know very well that switching is no fun. We all have the famous like quotes of people telling us what they would rather do than switch property management software. The favorite one I got is like someone would rather stab their eye out with a pen than switch software again. But we're here to talk about that you don't need to do that. You can actually find ways to switch software in a very good, meaningful way that's great for your business. So I just wanted to say hi, introduce myself, hand it off to Jared, who will be leading most of the conversation today, and I'll be chiming in as needed. Jared, take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. Hey, everyone. Jared Paglialonga here. I'm going to be drawing from my experience as a Streamline user, first and foremost, managing our family portfolio for teaming vacation rentals, which we've since exited around 450 units on Streamline. I'm joined by a few other folks with their, very important stories as well. And we're going to be discussing, how to switch, how not to switch softwares, how to stick the landing, and everything in between. So looking forward to getting into it with everyone today.
Yeah, so I'll take this. Matthew Shadle, Chief Technology Officer, Cabins for You. Been here about 12 years. And as the bio says there, I was the lead project manager for switching to Streamline from a proprietary system that we had in-house. We had about 400 or 500 units when we did the switch. So that was not a light task, but it was fun to be able to manage that with the team and work through getting on Streamline.
Yes, and my name is AJ Raber. I am the current CTO at B&B Breeze. I've been there for around 3 years and would oversee our revenue, marketing, sales, and tech teams. So we integrated in around a year and a half ago, which was a super fun process, but it's paid dividends since. So yeah, we've been with Streamline and working with the different teams in tech, marketing, and sales. It's important. It was very important for me to see how the PMS intertwines all the inner departments and everything works together.
Right. So to kick us off, why switch it all? If it's such a hassle, if it's like getting a root canal, why do we ever do it? So let's talk a little bit about those key reasons. For me, on the financial side, many other reasons, and if not all, really, in my perspective, can be tied back to, two main reasons, which is going to be how your system affects your top line and your bottom line revenue, right? That's my outlook. What would you say, Matt, AJ, for how that looked and what scenarios you guys found yourselves in when you were contemplating the switch? What factors were the tipping point, so to speak?
Yeah, so like I mentioned in the intro, we had a proprietary system that we were using, very antiquated. It was locally hosted. And so for us, our corporate office is not located where a lot of our properties are at. So we're multi-site location. And having a system that's not cloud-based, one, was a huge problem. And so in addition to that, we had to have all these different add-ons or patch products to be able to really function. And it just got to a point where it was too old, right? We were too big for the product, and we outgrew the product when COVID hit, right? And so that's kind of when we decided to make that switch in 2020, 2021. And so it was outdated soft development, it was service gaps, it was inefficiencies, the product going down and trying to get it back up, and so it was multifaceted. But I think your 3 bullet points here, Jared, really speak to what caused me to present the switch to our CEOs.
Right. Sounds like you were working for your software rather than it working for you, brother.
Absolutely.
What would you say, AJ?
Yeah, so for us, it wasn't as much revenue on the front end. It was more so our team was spending so much time dealing with errors, outdated development, and certain of these things that were holding back our team. So since moving, it's actually been able to hit the revenue line by freeing up our team. So when our team's operating at a more smooth, fast pace, then everything's. I actually just had a call with somebody talking about this earlier. It's not like a better PMS necessarily affected our ADR occupancy revenue, but it frees up everybody else to be doing better, giving better hospitality and all those things that in the end do affect that. And so for us, we were on with 2 different PMSs in the past with Guesty and Cyrus. Our softwares were holding us back, where felt like we were more advanced as a company, and we wanted to move with somebody that was developing faster than us. So and stop being inefficient. So that's kind of the reducing of downtime and inefficiencies is kind of the reason we switched.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. There's always a fire to put out in vacation rentals, right? Like every single day. There's always an owner, there's always a guest, there's always something. So we end up, to your point, AJ, I feel like we're always doing what's urgent, but that doesn't mean we're always doing what's important, right? And I think a key factor of any good system is it's going to free up your time to think about the big things that are going to have a profound impact on your business. Like, hey, we have this automation squared away with how we're communicating with our guest workflow, so we have less touch points. So we can focus on getting a really awesome, owner sign up page that can funnel our growth engine, right? Stuff like that.
It's interesting because, the why is such an interesting moment of, okay, I need to switch software that everyone seems to have. And that's typically right after we get to talk to them, Jared, in the sales side of things. So I always ask people like, hey, happy to talk to you about Streamline, but why are we talking? And it's interesting that it's from the same pool that everyone's talked about so far. It's like, I often hear I'm doing things manually that I feel like my software should be able to do for me. Like I'm just doing things as like busy work versus running a business worried about, the guest experience and driving revenue.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd be curious to understand for you all, like, was it all at once that you're like, I'm over it? Or was it kind of little by little that these incremental things over a period of time, we kind of realized that this isn't working? What would you guys say?
Yeah, I think it was definitely brewing over the years. I think we probably outgrew our system probably 2 years before we finally switched. And I think what caused it all to come to a head was COVID, right? The surge of demand and the influx of reservations and calls and not being able to manage rates effectively because we didn't have a dynamic pricing tool, not being able to handle communication appropriately because we didn't have automation with communication. I think there was just everything came together and hit that brick wall when that demand surge came through with COVID. And I was like, all right, this is enough. I've had enough of this. We've got too many problems. We got to do something better and improve our tech stack.
Yeah, and kind of same here. We were pushed to it by frustration. So enough. It was probably a 6 month to a year time. I wish we would have done it earlier because we went through a 6 month to a year time of being frustrated. So there was a lot of either units going down and sinking. Just a lot of tech issues that pushed us a year later to have to urgently move, rather than it was not a methodical, let's do this for advance. We were kind of forced into our decision, and we wish we would have been a little more methodical at the beginning and maybe switch before crap hit the fan.
Right. Like the things, it was coming apart at the seams, right? Almost like where like Airbnb wasn't working. Like, that can't happen. Something to that effect. For you, Matt, it sounds like, and this is so common in this industry because we're a cottage industry and people can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, is that more often than not, Matt, what you have is a victim of success. Right? We couldn't raise the rates fast enough.
It was a bad problem to have. Yeah.
No, it's not, but it's a common one. It's a common one is what I would say, because so many people are growing, exponentially over the course of 1 year. They can, 10x their portfolio. And we're one of the few industries where that is achievable by an owner operator in small business. So it's important that you have a system that can grow with you and meet those needs as they evolve, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about sort of the chain of we realize we need to switch, and then we're going to talk about like when and then the process. So we're sort of going down the timeline there. Sorry to interrupt you there, Jared, but let's move into like when to switch. Obviously, there is never a perfect time to switch. So we're always busy around the clock. Even in mud season, we have things to do. So moving forward to the next slide, let's discuss, when you guys decided would be there's never a perfect time, but when is the appropriate time to switch?
Yeah. So I think, like I mentioned, we did it mid-COVID, right? So we started the conversations probably Q2 of 2020, right? So right after everything kind of just started to take off, the transition was probably 6 months just with just conversations of how the system's going to work, what we needed to do. That was me interviewing all PMS companies, right? And I think for us, it was, let's start at the first of the year, right? So I think we based our switch on fiscal year transition just to make it easy on finance team, on owners, and transitioning that whole finance piece. But like you said, there is no perfect time. And I think if you're getting to the point where you're starting to have problems, you're starting to struggle or get frustrated like AJ and myself, start having the conversations with other companies, right? Call Kyle and Jared. Don't wait too long because then you're in AJ's shoes where it's urgent and you're rushing to try to get something in place that may try to fix your problems. I would start sooner than you feel like you should.
Yeah, and for me, the timing is almost most important for your bandwidth. So we actually did this I was looking back at dates. We actually did this in the middle of our peak season. I didn't realize until I went back and looked at the times. So for us, we did not have the bandwidth that's quite ready, put that in place, and then things went very smooth after that. So I just would encourage you, when you're looking to switch, bring in the right people and just make sure that you have the pieces in place to do the switch. Because if you have the right people in place, it's actually very smooth. Streamline, no other people can walk you through the process well. But I will say, if you're always waiting on the downtime in the off season, you'll be waiting forever. Our businesses should always be growing, and in our off season is more focusing on owners. So there's not really, in our business, and I'm not sure about y'all, there's not a time when we're sitting by and twiddling our thumbs. So it's pretty much ripping the Band-Aid off and putting the people in place to get it done so your business can thank you later.
Fun fact, I actually got the opportunity to sell Teaming Vacation Rentals when they moved off of a software into Streamline, and that was Jared heavily involved in that. So Jared, when did you guys at Teaming decide when to switch?
We started our transition, actually, I think, Matt, right when you finished yours, right? So we started that January 1st date. We planned to activate in May, and stuff happened and we pushed it out to July. A lot of the times when I talk to folks, they are waiting for that like perfect time for the stars to align, like you said, AJ, and for the sun to stand still. It never does. Unfortunately, I wish it did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we went live in July, which is our peak season as well. I think a lot of people imagine that you're flipping 100 switches as you activate the system that day. Where in reality, I think we all know that the work is done in the front end and all the months before. The best thing your activation can be, in my opinion, is anticlimactic, right? It's like, all right, that's it. Like you want to be asking that question because we already have everything and all the work that we've done up until that point to get us there. I think the only other thing is that, if you are in a situation where it's not working for your business now and you're waiting for that time to align, better, you are going to pay, you pay a price for waiting, right? Not taking an action is still an action. And oftentimes it's the worst choice you can make. So you're going to pay an opportunity cost for as long as things aren't working, as long as you have to go manually add some booking or do this or that because it's broke. You're going to pay for that in your time, and your time is valuable is the one thing I would add when it comes to assessing when you have the bandwidth to make this transition. Ask yourself the question, when do I not, when can I afford not to do this?
Maybe switching is not the answer, right? So what is not a reason to switch? So especially in today's industry, one of the reasons I wanted to put in, I've been here about 8 years and I've seen the massive influx of technology into our vacation rental space, which has been awesome. We need technology as much as we can over here. Going into it, now we're a household name. I don't think we necessarily were a household name 8 to 10 years ago. Now we are. Now we have Super Bowl commercials highlighting our industry. It's awesome. But with all this new tech comes some tech that we might not need, right? So moving on to the next slide, let's discuss that. Jared, maybe you can start with what you experienced a little bit.
Yeah, this is what I would call the G. Willikers effect, which is to say you see something you like, it's very cool, it's new, and without weighing the ROI or impact upon our business, we make a financial decision to buy that product, right? We should always be weighing things against what they can do for us. I'll pick on my father. He's not on today's webinar, I don't think, and he's retired, so we can pick on him a little bit. But an anecdotal story I might have is, at one point we wanted to add a tool that cost us $3 a month, but it texted the guests right when they entered the lock on the door code. Now, we have the ability to do that already at 4 p.m. when they should be checking in to give them their Wi-Fi code. So we have to weigh actually what is the value of automating it to send right when they enter the door code. And I posited that value wasn't $3 per unit per month. At 4, it'd be quite expensive. So, you really want to measure impacts behind things and what they can do for your business rather than getting kind of lured in by something that might be flashy, but we're not sure about what that impact might be. And do either of you, Matt, AJ, have kind of like a G. Willikers effect story or something, to that effect?
Not a direct is like you, but something I've been currently working on, looking at replacing some survey systems that we use. And there's all kinds of systems that do that. But what we're currently using is working, and we're not using all the features that it has. And so I'm like, well, why don't we just keep using what we're using? We've been using for years. We know how to work it. We've got the historical data, and implement some of the new stuff without getting sold by this new, oh, look what this can do, look what that can do, that we probably wouldn't use anyways. And so I think your avoid the flashy tech, right, is super key in interviewing any type of tech piece that you're looking to add to your company.
Yeah, and also make sure that nothing you have currently in your tech stack, to your point, Matthew, doesn't already do it.
Yeah, and on the flashy point, that's actually, it brings up a good point from something that we see internally about our PMS and good software. It's not sexy, but it works. So like in this industry right now, there's a lot of money being poured into making softwares look sexy and like look on the UX side, all their marketing and money is spent on the UX, where functionality to me as a company and to companies that are growing, and if you're willing to use Streamline, then you already have a decent amount of properties. Like you're not just a starter. And so that kind of brings me into the fact that like we care about substance over UX. So when interviewing companies, and this goes for even non-PMSs, pricing, marketing things, like I would spend way more time looking at the long-term functionality than how nice the dashboard looks with the colors on it and everything. So like functionality over UX is very important for us.
It's funny, I find a lot of people sort of admitting that they know and realize that they're not utilizing their full stack as they could. Like I use the same iPhone as my mom. I'm sorry, I get way more out of my iPhone. I use way more features than my mom does. And so many companies like that, you know, don't use all they can, but then look for another product. That's another thing that's happened with development in our tech space is there's a lot of, you know, we integrate with Breezeway, but we kind of do some of the same things. A lot of the softwares do some of the same things. So it's important to dive into that and understand your tech stack and what you can use that you already have access to. Really good point.
How to shop. So this is critically important, right? Understanding, you know, a software that meets your needs. It doesn't need to be all things to all people. It needs to solve my problems right here, right now. Right. So let's dive into a little bit about, you know, ways we can ascertain that throughout the shopping process.
And that's another thing, Jared, is, you know, I know it's tough. If you're looking at a property management software and you've looked at Streamline and 5 or 6 others, heck, there's 20 that you can choose from. It's really hard to ascertain what is the big differentiators. They all seemingly seem the same, but that's a commodity. This is not apples to apples. Softwares are apples to oranges to grapes to everything else, right? So diving into how do you differentiate what you need out of all these different softwares? So the needs analysis, Jared, sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, so for that, you know, the key part to understanding what you need is ask your team, right? Make sure you understand what it needs to do for them and their job role. You want to get that from, you know, the managers, the team leads, but also even line staff, right? It's still valuable. Everyone's perspective is valuable. You consolidate all that information into what I call a needs analysis. I was an English teacher in another life. That's what I called it there. I'm calling it that here. So of what are the needs, right, of this company? And before you ever call the sales guy, that's something that's good to have in hand. But you can do it after you've talked to me too. No hard feelings there. But, you know, it's a great resource, and it's going to help you, to Kyle's point, disambiguate the forest from the trees, which is to say, okay, this can do that, but not this. This one can do this, but not that. And you compile all of that so that it's documented, because if you're having multiple demos over the span of 3 weeks, you know, you got to have a steel trap to retain all that. And here's to you if you can. But for most of us, it's great to have all that, you know, at your fingertips so that we don't have any surprises. Folks that do this from the outset do not have surprises in the onboarding stage. And we don't want surprises in onboarding. So it's a good way to mitigate risk, I would say. What would you guys, you know, Matthew, I know you had a comprehensive, you know, analysis for the cabins for you migration. What did that look like for you in particular?
Yeah, I think for us, like we made a decision like, hey, yes, we're switching, right? And so where are we going was the next question. And so I talked to, and I think the person that's kind of spearheading this project of switching PMSs needs to know the business inside and out, right? I think they need to have the knowledge of all departments, whether it's a little bit of knowledge or the full depth is fine, but they got to know what is necessary to run the business. And I think once you've got the needs of the company and the organization, then you can say, okay, what companies or what PMSs check the box, right? And then everything else on top of that is just gravy, right? So once you meet your needs, then you look at like, okay, what does this do better than this one, and this one do better than that, and what integrations are better here and there. And I think just getting to the core of what you can't live without is so essential when you're shopping for a PMS. It's a non-negotiable, really.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that, the one thing that I would do is sit down operationally, and this comes from knowing your business, like Matt said. Sit down with different departments. What are the weak points in our PMS right now? What would you like to see differently? And like this list, I honestly feel bad for your sales guy when you come to them with this whole list. Like there should be a lot of questions, like functionality questions based on my reservations team hates when checkouts do this. Like, how does this work? Like, and so I would come equipped with the functionality to see like, what am I getting myself into and how does this actually affect all the departments in my business, rather than just thinking of it's a way to sync integrationally with different OTAs.
So don't feel bad for the sales guys, anyone.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
Send us the large RFPs. You know, we're happy to answer them. I would imagine some softwares are not so happy to answer them because their answers aren't as good. But hit us up, ask all the questions. I just wanted to mention real quick about this ROI calculator. We've put together, return on investment calculator. It's more of a way to just understand your current tech stack costs versus what your potential new costs are. So if you're interested, let us know. We'll reach out. But essentially it's, hey, I'm paying this much for PMS, but I also use this for accounting. I use this for marketing, this for revenue management. There's a lot of things to consider when moving over to Streamline. It's kind of one rate for all of the things. So I just wanted to mention we've asked about the ROI calculator. Let us know if you're interested. But yeah. I wanted to ask Matt and AJ, did you guys have a specific list, like an RFP? I know the answer, but let everyone else know.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Who implemented it? Like did you just ask everyone what they need? Did you guys have a big meeting? Was it all hands on deck as far as like, if you want it, let's ask for it? Or was there a little bit of cleansing of, let's make sure we're asking for things that are possible, things like that?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to the ROI calculator. So like when we switched that, y'all hadn't built that yet. So I had to do that on my own. And so I did my presentation. I was like, here's what we're using. Here's what we're paying. Here's what we're using. Here's what we're paying. We can get rid of all of this. And so I had to do the whole ROI calculator manually. So lucky to any new potential clients for Streamline that they get to do it automatically. But yeah, I think our team, once we made the decision, we have what we call SLT, which is our senior leadership team. And so we kind of touched each team member who touches all departments of like, what's working, what's not working, how can we make it better? And then we just kind of got a list together of non-negotiables and what would be nice, and then just went to market.
Yeah, I would bring in your team. Like we brought in our team, but not enough to actually be involved with all the decision making. As Matt knows, not everybody in your company should be making a decision on a PMS. So like with his SLT or ours, like it's good to have one person who's able to hear and realize what all needs to go on. But the person who actually understands how to make it happen is a pretty viable asset when it comes to seeing, can we do this? What should we not? But yeah, our whole leadership team was involved in the whole ROI process to decide whether to do it or not.
I filled out your RFP. It was extensive. How did you guys put that together on your end, Jared?
So that was something we went through, the needs of all team. I think a lot of management is asking the right questions. To AJ's point, you need a quarterback, right? We can't have 100 cooks in the kitchen, everyone wanting to jump around on a demo. It's not very productive, in my opinion. It's rather go through, have them say what's important, and then go through that over the demo and be able to share that with them. They can then send follow-up questions. If the person, it needs to be meaningful, right? So I have had like a reservationist that started the week before demo Streamline. I'm happy to show her the system, but without understanding what stop gaps or what's like, hurting her workflow right now, it's hard to understand the art of the possible of how we can make that better. So it does matter, who's involved in that call. And I would say the AJ's correct. There needs to be a quarterback for the process, so to speak, that's heading up that project and is creating an accountability network for the rest of the team, which we'll touch on in a couple slides here. But managing that process is important so that we have that accountability and have someone driving things forward.
And yeah, before we move on to strategies and tips, I remember one of the things that you guys had, Jared, was like one of your must-have items, your dad's famed length of stay pricing, right? So
yes,
that's one thing that was a massive uplift for Streamline. But once looking into it, it was something that now length of stay is something that a ton of companies are using across our whole platform. So if there's certain things that are like needle movers, lean into it. If you really want a feature it's a huge difference maker, don't leave it, right?
Well, at the time, right, length of stay, nobody was doing it. My father had to beg Expedia not to turn it off, back when they still did ResVest. He sat across from the board. This is after they were recently acquired. He's like, if you do this, you're going to ruin the one advantage you have, or something to that effect. So he convinced them, but then they came out with that API and no one had actually built to it, was the unfortunate thing. So that was a partner we found in Streamline. And what I would say to that end, if you have something specific to your business that adds a ton of value, if nobody's doing it, tell us. Right? We can't promise that we're going to build everything and be all things to all people. But when there's a use case and it can help other folks as well, it's something that we do take that seriously. We are, founded by property managers, and we always want to put ourselves in the shoes of our users to understand their needs and how we can add value in their day-to-day lives. So we have strategies and tips. So pro tips, right? For when we're in the weeds of a migration, how do we do it effectively, right? How do we avoid pitfalls, keep the project moving, not miss any deadlines? Let's talk about it. So as I mentioned earlier, one thing that's important from the outset is creating an accountability network. That is to say that everyone knows what they're doing in this order of operations. So I know I'm, migrating over the bookings from our legacy system and getting that in Excel ready. Matthew knows that, he's creating the taxes and fees, and AJ knows that he's checking to make sure the owners are all set up. So this is something that we should do, when you meet with your provider for your new system, they'll go over these steps with you. My recommendation would be to have a separate call after that, say, all right, who's doing what, right? A quick powwow so that we can figure out what that might look like, and then set, potentially standing meetings at a weekly recurring cadence, and maybe, every other day, as you get right up to activation, and what that cadence might look like could be different for you, of course. But it is important to connect with everyone so we're all on the same page. How did you guys, what did you find was the most complex part about managing the project? And what was the greatest, asset for a trick or tip that you did in the onboarding journey that you think could help other folks?
Yeah, Jared, you call it an accountability network. I called it my implementation team, right? It was my team, right? So we had a few people just a select few people that were like, hey, we are working on the switch. And everyone else, when we're ready to train you, or if we need something from you, we'll come to you. But this core team is the one that's actually doing the lift of the switch. And I think that was super important because, like you said earlier, Jared, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? This goes to shopping and things you want. And this also goes for switching, because you got too many people doing too many things. They're all going to do the same thing, or nobody's going to do something. I was telling them before we started this webinar, I've got a whiteboard over on the other side of my office that literally has it broken down by different aspects of the system. So I've got units and owners and fees and rates and reservations and communication with tasks underneath it and checkboxes. I can't bring myself to erase the whiteboard because of all the amount of work and time that we put into doing the switch. But I think just being organized is really the biggest key to this, because once you get unorganized, you're going to miss stuff, and there's going to be things that you're going to look back on go live day and be like, well, what about this? And then you may get pushed. And then it's just, if you're not organized and you don't have a core team, it's really going to be a problem.
Yeah, and to kind of even hit back on what Jared said about the quarterback, I think a quarterback's more important on the implementation than sales on the sales side. So it's very important to delegate and have your team around you. That, like, one thing that we did, there's a lot of certain things you have to do for reservations where you're doing a lot of entries, like just a lot of different stuff, where we recorded Loom videos, which Loom is just a way that you can record your face with instructions. We sent out tasks to team members. You're in charge of this. Here's your task. And it was a way for all of us, very clearly delegated who's in charge of X. If two people in charge of X, nobody gets it done. So yeah, clear delegation from one quarterback was a big deal. One other thing I'll actually add from what I forgot to add in earlier, one of our biggest things that we use to evaluate softwares is how they handle support and how they handle ongoing tickets, what their team is like. That's something when interviewing in the sales process, I'd be asking those questions from somebody who's now in charge of a PMS long-term. how they deal with support is my biggest thing to long-term success of the company. So like, I actually feel bad for whoever sees my tickets at Streamline because they flow in very regularly. But that is actually, that's a big deal that I would talk about with your software PMS before you kind of go through the process.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite question from prospects, because I love to brag about our support team, honestly. We pick up the phone, and that's something that isn't the case for a lot of companies that are out there. So that's something that when folks ask, I pull up those metrics real time of what our clients are saying, and we float above around 90% satisfaction. So that is important, and it's something that I take pride in showing in my team.
Yeah, we're also proud of that. It's like Matt's board.
Yeah.
We worked long and hard trying to help service our companies the best way possible. Like if you submit a ticket and we get back to you in 3 hours, that's 3 hours too long, even though that's lightning fast by KPI metrics. So we developed the knowledge base and other things to help our clients get even faster service. So yeah, we're pretty proud of our customer service and want to brag about it. Any other tips and tricks on, actually having a successful software switch in the long run, other than you just got to buckle down and be super, organized with everything, have a whiteboard?
Yeah, a few things worth mentioning. I mean, we were talking about this in like the waiting room before the webinar started. One thing that's important is, a lot of people think, I'll set that up once I activate it. That mañana mentality, that tomorrow might never come, right? So if you wait to later, set up some automation on how to reach out to repeat guests, right, and have them rebook with you. And if you don't do it when you're thinking about the software and setting it up, I would posit it's a lot less likely you go back and do it once you don't want to think about the software and it's up and running. So that's one thing. Another would be, if you are a company with, let's say over 100 units, I would recommend, have a board, a wonderful whiteboard like Matt has, or a tool like Microsoft Project, I think is $10 a month. It's well worth it to be able to set up a Gantt chart for your team, so if someone's task is blocking someone else from doing what they need to do, and can manage everything in relation to everything else, which is important because one thing affects another in a complicated project like this, and you want to make sure you have an idea for how it all looks in totality.
Yeah, Jared, I wanted to add too. I think we're underplaying Streamline's piece in the switch, right? I mean, we had a project manager that was assigned to our switch, and she was great. Like, she was at my beck and call. If we had questions, she had answers very quickly. She made sure we stayed on our timeline that we gave her for our go live. So I think another piece of that is the software. In my instance, Streamline's project manager for my case was on top of it as well. And so that was huge for us to, hey, are we doing this wrong, or should we do this, or giving feedback or giving suggestions or whatnot. So that was also a very valuable piece to our transition.
It's a good point, Matt. Yeah, we worked hard to create that process. It's not our first rodeo. Some things experience teaches, right? So experience teaches, and in that way, we've crafted that process by onboarding 1,000 other clients plus, right? So that's helped us form something that works, and something that helps people get through the hoop, creates accountability as well with our clients, and gives them access to the tools they need in case, we got to troubleshoot for something with them.
And I'm glad you mentioned timing, Matt, because that's what we're up against, is time on our end, trying to be a good project manager and get you all through it. There's so much for y'all to do and consider as far as how we're going to set up Streamline and all the customization, but oftentimes it's like, hey, I need to go live January 1st, or I need to go live before March because we are stacked super busy in March. So yeah, that's why all of these things are even more important as far as an accountability network or project manager, making sure if it's this week, we got to get this stuff done this week. Otherwise, we're going to get behind the 8 ball and we're off track. And once you get off track, it's hard to catch up. So it's important to have these things unlocked from the start.
All right, sticking the landing. So this is going to be for the final stages, once we're getting close to activation, how we ensure we have all our ducks in a row so that we don't have any surprises on activation day. I always say we hate surprises at Streamline, and we have a lot of tools in place to avoid those outcomes with folks onboarding onto the system. But we'll cover about a bit of stories from you all. And what I would say first and foremost is audit everything. And we have an audit report that we run on the Streamline side to say, hey, we noticed one unit is missing taxes. Is that intentional, right? And we'll assist users in that way and say, did you mean to sell it for $10 a night on this 7-bedroom home before we activate it? So we run an audit on our end. However, it's so important to test things yourselves and to create those test bookings before you have a single reservation come in. If the clean, was off, we want to find that out before the first booking, not on the 50th booking. So that's my biggest thing is spider audit, check your system, see that everything's pulling through as expected. When those listings go up on channels, check the channels. Does it look correct? Is everything as you expect? Is there something that's not? We can solve for that, but we want to find that out as soon as possible, not a week later, a month later, and we find out family friendly wasn't checked and that's why it's not getting bookings or something. We want to avoid those outcomes and we have tools to help users avoid them, but it takes two to tango, right? What would you guys have to say about, what audits you did or things you checked before the activation that were critical?
Right. I think our saving grace was we probably could have pushed the button to go live, I'd say a couple weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks prior to when we did. But those 2-3 weeks allowed us to, one, we had to import future reservations, but we were still getting reservations in our other system, right? So our teams got the experience of, hey, this reservation came in, go put it in the system. This reservation came in, go, so they got the experience of using the system to get familiar with it, but also to see, oh, hey, well, I put this in and this isn't adding up, or I put this in and something doesn't look right. So I think we were ready a little early, but those weeks of using the system while it wasn't live, we were using the system, allowed us to test and audit all of the pieces other than the just actual feeds from like the website and OTAs. But I think those extra weeks gave us a lot of clarity on what we missed and how we could prepare for the actual go live date.
I agree. When entering all the reservations and doing a lot of that, to in real time see things are allocating percentage based, all this stuff. Is it all calculating right? And I don't have a figure here except for the fact we should be living in constant audit. So even now, when we're creating a new document that contains a link that's from an API connection and sends to an OTA or something, we're constantly having to audit, even real time now. So that's a good practice to start in and audit everything and just keep going for your business.
Yep. And that's what I tell the folks, I'm sure Kyle's never had anyone say, Kyle, I needed to be live yesterday when I signed up the system. And it's a big goose egg in case anyone on this webinar is wondering for the amount of people that have said that and then successfully implemented yesterday as their activation. Because, you need fluency, to Matt's point, to AJ's point. You need to know where to look for things and how to use the tool. Software without, a race car, it needs a race car and a race car driver. And if someone doesn't know how to drive a race car, we're up the creek without a paddle, because it's critical that you know what you're doing so that if you need to cancel a booking, you can do that. If we have folks, the expectation that it's going to be a week and we're activated, we don't want to put them in a situation where, they don't know how to do any of these things. They don't know how to change rates, photos, etc. So there's an order to these operations, and all this, is working towards that finely polished result. But I like the constant audit also. That's a good mantra. So the never-ending story, we were weighing whether or not to include from the never-ending story, the movie, a slide here. We opted against it, but it was under consideration. So, and that is just to say, everyone, that when you activate your system, that doesn't mean we're done getting our use out of the tool, right? Because any software you sign with, anyone at all, they need to have a continuous development cycle so that they're constantly improving on their system, making it better for you, taking your feedback into consideration, adding new tools to make your life easier. And as we roll those tools out, we do a fun way of it at Streamline. Right now we're on the mermaid version of Streamline. It was dragon earlier in the year, so it's fun fantasy creatures we're doing right now. But our users have access to review all those new developments we've built. And I would say, and challenge everyone, it behooves you to review those updates to see, can we automate something that someone's doing manual right now? Can we be more efficient? Can we monetize this feature, right? And always be assessing and keep your head on a swivel for what's new and what I could be doing, because you'll go to market with your system getting about, on average, I'd say 70% a value of the tool for system utilization, it's the goal in the years thereafter to get as close as you can to 100% utilization. What would you guys have to say about, how that recurring process works and what that looks like and what's been important in that goal?
Yeah, I think for us, we feel like we're pro users, right? Because we're in so much, we're a larger company, but there's always something new, right? And there's always a feature release. There's always an update of, hey, this fixed this bug, or hey, we've released this. And so staying on top of those releases and the emails that come out and just learning like, hey, well, now we can do this. Well, that'll save our marketing team an hour and a half every single day, right? Like just the continuous improvement, like you say, has really been beneficial for us. And the ongoing education, I think even though I was the one that kind of spearheaded the project of switching, people think I'm the expert. But there's still something for me to learn every single day in the system, right? There's still things that I may not know, but continue to explore the system, ask questions to your account manager, just be able to learn, right? Just be available to learn anything new. And again, read those releases because there's always something new and cool that's coming out.
Yeah, and to piggyback there, like the continuous learning, where we are right now with our PMS is very different from where we started. And part of that is we've been to a ton of conferences, which this is if you're a owner, going to conferences as a whole changed our business. I mean, I'm pretty sure we 10x'd almost in the 2 years that we started going to industry conferences, because you realize that you're not the only one doing this. And Streamline actually puts on a conference that we go to every year that's been very beneficial for us out in Phoenix, where you're actually able to talk to these people in person, hear them. Yeah, and that process has been great. And this kind of the ongoing, this goes back to how good their support is. So everything that's going on and changing, the better the company is at handling tickets and getting back to you, the more viable your long-term success will be. Which, to speak there, I know we're not trying to force Streamline down your throat. I especially don't work for Streamline, but I will say, like, the ongoing ticket support has been unreal here with, like, even if it gets escalated to a higher team member, I've had high up people at Streamline intervene, come up with a custom solution. Like, everything's always evolving, and my feedback has been incredible from how our company's been handled by support and just getting new changes implemented.
Yeah, you mentioned our Streamline Summit. Go to streamlinesummit.com if you want to check that out. That's like our marquee event every year that we absolutely love, the FaceTime with our clients like AJ. And then with ongoing education, we have Streamline University and things like that they can dive into and continue to go. But like Matt said, let us know what you want out of the software, because Streamline in particular, we've have what's called back-end variables. So it can customize itself in ways I don't even know. Matt doesn't know. Like, experts of the software only on the back end, like in our accounting department, know. So if there's little things like that, it very well already could be a variable we could turn on for you. If not, we could look into developing it.
We actually just had that happen this past week, right? We were looking at something with one of our integrations, and I reached out and I was like, hey, can we do this? And they're like, oh yeah, here, you just go turn it on over here, and here's how you set it up. And it's like, that's going to make us a lot of money, right? And so that wasn't something that's going to save us time. That's actually a monetary thing that's going to make our company a lot more money. So that feature that, we didn't know existed or didn't ask the right questions or whatever, just having that there turned on is going to be huge financially.
Do not copy paste I'll tell everyone this, please do not try and copy paste what you're doing now to your new system. You're going to try and square peg round hole. You called us for a reason. And we don't want to, manually send the rental agreements. We cannot. And there are things that we could ask to that degree. And I would tell people to keep that open mind, right? Take a step back, think about, not only how it works now, but how it can be better. One thing about our space is that things can always be better when it comes to technology and in hospitality, I would argue. So in both those regards, we're always striving towards that goal. And that in itself is another never-ending journey.